Welcome to Self Wellness. Welcome back to another episode of Maha with Mike, where we cut through the noise and ask the hard questions that other podcasts don't want to ask. And we are going to explore the stories that you thought you might not be hearing today. But it brings up a very personal question, especially for aspiring moms, a very deeply personal and scientific controversial territory, the COVID-19 vaccine. I mean bioweapon. I mean vaccine. Sorry, there's a little glitch in the matrix, and their potential long-term effects on health that are just now beginning to surface in new research. Our first guest is someone who's become one of the most prominent and polarizing figures in the vaccine debate. Steve Kirsch is a tech entrepreneur and a medical freedom advocate and a very good friend of the Lindell TV network. He has been at the forefront of questioning the official COVID vaccine narrative. Today, he's going to be joining us to unpack findings from a recent study out of the Czech Republic suggesting that, get this, a possible link between the COVID vaccine and fertility or conception challenges. What does the science actually say? And not only that, but what are we actually hearing about it? Mainstream news? Crickets. Later in the segment, we'll be bringing in Matt Comier, a researcher and data analyst who's been studying the immune response and neurological development. He's going to help us dig into a pressing question that is what we already know, but we must ask, is there a question between vaccine-induced viral mimicry and the rise of autism diagnoses? The conversation isn't easy, and it's certainly without controversy, but this is one definitely worth having. So let's first bring in Steve. Steve Kirsch, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Good to be here.
It was very alarming reading that study out of the Czech Republic.
No, it should be to anyone. There was basically a 33% or so decrease in the ability to have a successful conception for women who took the vaccine. And they had a pretty narrow group. It was like 18 to 39-year-olds. And so you can't say that it was age confounded. People in that age group, a lot of them took their doctor's advice to get the vaccine, and they paid the price for it. And, we hear the anecdotal stories of this, and we put two and two together, but this is the first time that it's made it to the sort of the mainstream medical journals that confirms the 1/3 reduction. Now that's a train wreck. It shouldn't be anywhere close to that. And there's no way that you can whitewash that or make excuses for it. There was one epidemiologist or biostatistics expert, Professor Jeffrey Morris, and he said, that's because of age confounding. Well, unfortunately, they couldn't adjust for that because they were denied the data. However, people who opt for vaccination are generally healthier in every study. And so healthier people should have less problems, fewer problems with conception. And this study clearly shows that they had significantly more problems. And of course, we're seeing this in other studies as well, and we're seeing this from doctors who have patient bases and large numbers of patients that they see. And like Jim Thorpe has been calling for this for a long time, saying he's never seen so many issues before. So when you compare that to an absolute basis, you see the same sort of thing. Like this did not happen before the vaccine, and all of a sudden we're getting all these problems. And then the study shows that, well, let's see if it's the vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and indeed it is. So there's really no way that they can go and and claim that this is a good study. It's not.
So this is really good news for the people that wrote the Georgia Guidestones, the guys that inscripted the Georgia Guidestones. They don't want the population above 500 million. So, I mean, that's a good way to get it, is by starting having a third of the women in the countries not be able to produce women or be able to produce offspring. That is very, very alarming, because we've already had issues in lots of countries that are seeing a decline in the birth rate. And that's how
Right.
that's how you end a civilization.
If that was your goal, then recommending the COVID vaccines to pregnant women would be a good way to do that. Now, it doesn't mean that people are infertile. It just means that they have a much lower chance of a successful conception. So it's not, if you take the shot, it doesn't mean you can't conceive. It's just or that some people can't conceive and others can. The study just looked at percentages, so it didn't look at it on a per person basis. So it's probably the case that it's on an individual basis that it simply reduces your chances. So if you had on this pregnancy you had you had a third less chance of a successful conception. The next one, it's a third less chance. The next one's a third less chance, but there's still a chance that you can conceive. So it doesn't entirely cause an individual to not be able to give birth. It just says that we lowered the probability.
Well, we want to approach this with open minds, and we do believe that there's a lot of things that people can do to reverse what they decided to put inside of their body. I do believe that there is always a detox course. There is always something that we can do. I believe the only thing, unless with Jesus, you can't be brought back from, is death. I don't know if you speak Japanese, but I've got a clip for you, and I believe it does have subtitles, so my listeners won't get too lost, but try to pay attention to the rolling words at the bottom, and I think we'll get that through. Drake, go ahead and roll that clip.
そして3月29日、その呼びかけがあり、本日6月15日、なんと1800万人の接種回数人数分のデータが蓄積されております。
者がオレンジで、接種者と非接種者を正確に比べようということをしてみますと、非接種者はね、山ができないっていうのは、これは当たり前なんですよね。打っても別になくなるわけじゃない、打っていませんので、何の問題もなく、フラットになるわけです。問題は接種者の方なんですけれども、緑のグラフ。それが初め低いんですが、1週間、2週間は少ないんです、むしろ。で、1月ぐらいから山がですね、大きくなってきまして、3ヶ月、4ヶ月目にすごい山ができるということになるわけです。それでですね、これっていうのはどういうことかっていうと、おそらく、打ったお医者さんたちは、打った当日、翌日、1週間ぐらいに関して言うと、おそらくワクチンの影響だろうということで、副作用が発生した、副反応が発生して、多分亡くなったということになりまして、PMDA にですね、送るわけですよ、その情報。ところが、1月、2月です。もう一つ。それからもう一つ、分かったことなんですけども、接種をですね、打てば打つほど山が前の方、左の方に、移動しているという現象も分かりまして、接種回数が増えていくと、死亡者の山の出現が早くなります。ということは、打てば打つほど死にやすくなると。より短い期間で亡くなる人が増えてくるということでありまして、それでまずですね、山ができる、でワクチン接種に毒性だとか死亡を誘導する効果がなければ、山にまずならないわけですよ。これがまず一つの発見で、打つ回数が増えれば増えるほど移動していくというふうなことは、打ったですね、毒性が重複どんどんしていって、回数が増えれば増えるほど早くなくなっていくというふうなことだと思います。
The more doses you receive, the faster people die. Are you surprised?
No, in fact, I have a portion of the Japanese data that was provided to me by a former professor. who had access to the data in his particular city. And so I have 132,000 or so records of people, including over 4,000 of those people who died. And the analysis of that data clearly shows that more shots, more deaths. It's unambiguous, and I just posted a challenge on my Substack, and I said, hey, look, this is record level data, and it's very good record level data. Actually, I was surprisingly good. So if you analyze it on a population level, in other words, you don't look at whether people got the vaccine or not, it looks perfectly normal. If you then segment it into people who got the vaccine and people who didn't get the vaccine, it's not normal at all. So now, normally when you do that, people who don't get the vaccine, they typically have a higher death rate. So you have to account for that. But the point is that when you actually do the graphs and you say, well, how many people actually got this dose versus didn't get the dose, and you plot the age standardized mortality rate, you find that it goes up quite dramatically with each shot. So I've challenged the world's epidemiologists to prove me wrong. Now, the data and analysis of this is straightforward, and the signal is very large. So I don't think I'm going to get any takers on my challenge. I've offered $2,500. I could offer more. And, it's a test. It's a test to see whether any epidemiologist in the world disagrees with me. I'm essentially compensate you for your time. First person to submit an entry that convinces my AI engine versus my analysis wins the $2,500. I don't think anyone will enter because I don't think there's a way you can analyze this data any other way. But if you can, then that would be interesting because it would say that epidemiology is a fraud because you can't have two different outcomes. Either this vaccine is safe or it's not. And it's unsafe to a huge degree. And so if epidemiology claims that this is a safe vaccine, then epidemiology is horribly broken. So we're going to find out some interesting truths with this challenge. We're going to find out whether epidemiology is a science or it's no better than throwing darts. And we're going to find out if there's an epidemiologist in the world who thinks the vaccine is safe. All by exposing record level data from Japan.
I don't think that they're going to want to do that because they're probably going to lose their jobs if they try to go in and then it gets picked up by mainstream media that they tried to debunk you and then found out that we were right all along. So how do we spread this information more? What do we got to do? First of all, whoever's watching, share this episode. Put this on your Substack, put this on your Twitter, put this on your Instagram, put this on your Facebook. We need to get these videos going viral, guys. We have to get this information out there because I think Japan has conducted a study on a large scale to show that the more doses you get, the quicker you die. The one thing that you saw was the unvaccinated were not affected. The unvaccinated line at the bottom stayed pretty solid. It was pretty straight line. You have a huge wave a couple months after getting an inoculation, or even closer to the graph, moves to the left, the more inoculations that you get. So people that were going out and getting 3-4 shots in a short period of time, they were dying much quicker than the people that got 1 or 2 doses.
Yeah, so for any of these things, it's really important to interpret the data correctly. The study that was done in Japan, I think, has some issues with it because they assigned a vaccination date of a single point in time for people who were unvaccinated as a comparison. And so that's not quite the right way to do it. And the way that they did it on a per dose basis, they essentially reset the time clock. So the point is that it's a little misleading, the way that they presented the data, but there are other methods that don't suffer from those choices that they made. And it makes it much more clear that people are being killed by these shots.
Have you put any information on your Substack of what you think people should be doing to detox from this shot?
I haven't focused on detoxing. It's a whole different area, and so I know that there are a number of doctors with a number of different protocols that they say work. I have not evaluated those protocols, but I know that
Fair.
I know that people have been have done protocols that improve things. Now, whether they improved due to the protocol or whether they were just going to improve on their own, that could be subject to some discussion, right? Because we don't know if that's just a coincidence or not, and so you have to have fairly large numbers. But generally, people who go through these the various treatments, a lot of them do better. So it's not you can't cure people, but I know a number of people who basically have tried these methods, and they're still in very, very bad shape even after years.
Not good. Not good. What other research are you waiting on, or are you excited about anything else coming out? We have the Czech Republic data that's now been released, and we have this Japan study that's come out, which I didn't even see that study until you were invited to come onto the show, which is concerning because that data should be shared everywhere. Everybody should be reposting that on your Substack, so that way we can educate people and further give them informed consent. Are there any other data or any other people you're talking with where there's research that you're free to talk about? Is there anything new that's going to be coming out or completed here soon, if you can share?
Well, I think the most exciting possibility is to get some data transparency in the United States, and there's some talk of that that I've heard about. I haven't seen the data yet. I haven't seen progress on that. But if that happens, if they are able to free up some of this data that's being kept locked behind closed doors, then that would be extraordinary. So that will be the big event. And I've heard it's going to happen, and so I'm optimistic that it will happen. Because the biggest thing that allows this to keep happening is that they lock the data behind closed doors, and then people use various analysis techniques to show that the vaccines are safe and effective. And I'm familiar with these analysis techniques, and they can be misused to show that something which is dangerous is safe and effective. And we have our proof of that with the COVID vaccines, right? I think everybody knows now that these vaccines increased your risk of death. And yet all of these papers published in the peer-reviewed scientific literature claim the vaccines are safe. So it really calls into question the whole field of epidemiology. And they get away with it because the people who disagree with them never get access to the data, or almost never get access to the same data set. So it can't be independently analyzed or replicated. And you see this happening over and over and over again. And, for example, the Florida study with Surgeon General Joe Ladapo and Recep Levy, who's a MIT professor, that showed that people who got the Pfizer shot had a 36% increase in mortality after 2 doses. That's pretty troubling.
Why would a study like that come out and not be on mainstream media? Why would it not be on the cover of CNN?
Oh, it should be. But you see, that's the way the system works. Now, the only Surgeon General of any state in the United States that actually looked at his data is Joe Ladapo out of Florida. The only guy in the United States. And in fact, I don't know of any other health official anywhere in the entire world who has done a study like what Joe Ladapo did in Florida. They all refuse to look at their own data. You will never see a study comparing different vaccines like was done in Florida from any other health official anywhere in the world, because it's an admission that they were killing people. So nobody's going to do this study. This is why we only have one paper. And then they'll say, oh, well, we can safely ignore the Levy study in Florida because that result has not been replicated. Of course it's not been replicated. It's not been replicated because people don't want to look at their own data. And, of course, since they all keep the data hidden from view, nobody else can look at their data either. So they'll keep this quiet for, they could keep this going for decades, just like they do with vaccines and autism. They've known that vaccines cause autism for about 25 years or so, and they've kept it completely buried from the public for 25 years. So if they can keep that sort of thing buried, which it's an obvious signal. There are triplets that get autism within hours. All of them get autism within hours after a vaccine shot. And so you can't deny the causality. But then they'll say, oh, well, that was just a coincidence. No, it's the only time in history that I know of where triplets got autism at the same time. And coincidentally, it just happened to happen hours after a vaccine shot. I mean, these natural coincidences are not, they just seem to happen right after vaccine shots. And the same thing is true for the sudden infant death syndrome, where kids just are fine and they die suddenly. And it's always within a week after their vaccine shot. And certain vaccines, it happens more often than others. And, you can't, the police departments refuse to respond to FOIA requests, so they keep it hidden. And nobody's analyzing the data based on the time of the SIDS death from the time of vaccination. You never see a study like that. And so, they keep SIDS buried, they keep autism buried, they kept the COVID deaths buried. This is a pattern. And it's a pattern of, well, we're health officials, and if we get discredited, then no one else, then people won't believe us going forward. So let's just bury all this adverse evidence, because we don't want people we want people to listen to us. And if they found out that vaccines are causing pregnancy issues, that vaccines are killing people, that vaccines are causing autism, that vaccines are causing SIDS, that would be bad for health officials. So they keep it quiet.
The funny thing was, I tell parents all the time that when there's a financial obligation, there's a means to tell the truth. You become more truthful when money's involved. And I'll never forget the multiple visits to the pediatric where they would try to convince me to vaccinate my daughter. And I just, no, thank you, no, thank you. They'd come in with all the inserts. So I went in there one day with the doc, and I had my lawyer draft up a template. And I said, listen, I go, we're going to do the vaccines today. And he's like, great. And I go, but I want you to sign right here at the bottom that says that you yourself will be financially eligible and negligent if there's any issues that happen. I go, I want you to put yourself on the hook that if my daughter has any reaction, I can't go after. There's a protection against the vaccine manufacturer. I go from the 1996 Act. I go, but my lawyer said that if I have you sign this documentation that you agree to be financially responsible for any injuries to my daughter, I go, you will take care of her up until her 18th birthday. And then he goes, I'm not signing that. I go, so then you don't believe that the vaccine is truly safe. Well, exactly.
Only 18.
So,
only 18.
I was like,
that's nothing. Right? I mean, people can be set back for life.
Well, yeah, but at 18, then they can get their. They could. It didn't matter because he didn't sign it anyways.
Right.
Yeah, and this was so
but
long ago.
It should be extended.
16 years
Right.
ago. There might have not even been a time frame on it. It might have just said that you're responsible for any and all injuries. But the fact is that he didn't sign it because they understand. They know. They get bonuses when they have a certain percentage.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great idea. I think everybody should do that. Right? Because the manufacturers aren't liable because that's what Congress wants. They want to make sure that the drug companies are protected when they kill people. But you're right. There's no reason for not doing what you say. In fact, all doctors should sign that because they all know, or they claim that the vaccines are safe and effective. So that's a great idea to essentially expose that the doctors don't think the vaccines are safe.
Well, Steve, before you go, where can people subscribe to your Substack?
It's KirschSubstack.com, KIRSCH Substack.com.
Awesome. God bless you. Thank you so much. We're going to go to a quick commercial break and then going to be bringing in our next guest.
Great.
With everybody talking about making America healthy again, I thought today'd be a great day to talk to all my fellow patriots about the importance of making your homes healthy again. Well, we have proudly partnered with airwaterhealing.com and their revolutionary whole home air purification system. The V3 from Air Water Healing does 3,000 square feet of purification. It eliminates dust, mold, viruses, and odors. But here's the part I love. They require no filters to ever be changed and virtually no maintenance. Whether you suffer from asthma, allergies, seasonal bronchitis, or just want to protect your family from the flu or even greater threats, don't wait to get your V3 from airwaterhealing.com today. Use code Lindell for 20% off in savings and free shipping. That's promo code Lindell at airwaterhealing.com.
Are common viral infections like herpes simplex driving the autism epidemic? And are vaccines triggering the onset of autism by disrupting the immune system, causing the reactivation of viruses we're already carrying?
I don't know what to say other than Matt, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me on today, Mike.
Absolutely. I think you're asking the tough questions that we've all known for a very, very long time. You know that if you inject a child with an aluminum adjuvant and there's a peanut protein, there's a 100% chance that that child is going to be allergic to peanuts for the rest of their lives. They've known this. We've all known this.
I've read that, yeah. It creates a hypersensitivity. Vaccines push the immune system into a Th2 response, which basically an allergen response in the body. It's part of the humoral immune response.
So what led you to start driving, to start looking into this connection? Is it a personal issue? Do you have friends that were affected by vaccines?
To be honest with you, I think the majority of the United States has been affected by vaccines. I got into medical research about 12 years ago due to my own health problems. And as far as my research goes, there's been a lot of speculation about a causal link between vaccines and the onset of autism spectrum disorder. The goal of my research was to identify the variables. Why is it that one child is relatively fine after receiving a vaccine or a series of vaccines, and another child isn't? There's an acute illness, fever, often febrile seizures, and then regression into autism. So the goal of my research was to pinpoint, or at least hypothesize on the variable. What's causing that reaction? So I started investigating the biology of autism. What is autism? What's causing? If not vaccines, well, what is it? I found a lot of research. like herpes simplex, for instance, playing a central role in the development of autism disorder. There were several case studies showing neurotypical encephalitis, which is basically where a viral infection makes its way into the brain and the central nervous system. At that point, they start displaying symptom presentation and meet clinical diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder from there on out. So viral encephalitis acted as a trigger for autism. There's a lot of other research pointing to viral infections as well in the etiology and pathology of the condition. So that's pretty well established. You could say viruses are directly involved in causing autism. The next part of my research was, well, if viruses are involved in causing autism, how are vaccines playing a part in this condition? And I started searching research on vaccine-related adverse events. And I came upon a lot of research showing an association of viral reactivation following vaccinations. Meaning, if someone's already carrying, let's say, chickenpox virus, which is herpes zoster, or Epstein-Barr, or herpes simplex, when they receive a vaccine, it disrupts their immune system, which puts these viruses into a state of active replication in a pathogenic state. This can trigger various inflammatory processes in the body, one of them being viral encephalitis. And that's the basis of my paper. That's my hypothesis. I think viral infections are directly involved in causing autism, and I think vaccines trigger autism by reactivating viruses people are already carrying, like herpes simplex.
That's alarming. That's very, very alarming. And, one of the things, I was just talking with Steve Kirsch. He said that, there was triplets that were vaccinated together at the same time, and all three of them got autism. And, what's even more alarming to me is when you get the older children, of course, it's devastating to have autism, diagnosis in a young child, because then they have their entire life, but you kind of get used to that autism. When you have children that went 10, 15 years, right? I have a guy that comes into our wellness center. His son was 11 years old, playing the guitar. He was the captain of his soccer team, transferred from a private school to a public school, and he had to go in and get the updated immunizations. Now, the reason why his father had never done the shots in the past, I don't know. I didn't dive into that question. I just know that they went in, got the injections. That night, broke out into a horrible fever, like you had just said. The next morning, the child woke up and was nonverbal.
Yeah, exactly. I think the big question, though, that's not being addressed in this equation are the variables. Because other children, other teenagers receive vaccines and they're relatively okay, or at least acute illnesses don't present themselves immediately. As far as the long-term effects go, that's kind of a different discussion, but what is it that's being triggered exactly when someone receives a vaccine and then regresses into autism? And in my opinion, that variable is viral infections. There's people that have an ASD diagnosis that have never received any vaccines in their life. So it's not standalone one-to-one causal, vaccines cause autism. There's other factors. Just like any other condition, it's multifactorial, but I think viral infections play a central role.
Wow. So it's a mix. So it's a mix between the two.
Yes. There's a lot of research. If you comb a database for medical research, let's say like PubMed, there's quite a bit of research showing that exposure to heavy metal toxins increases susceptibility to viral infections and transmission. Right now, they're talking about banning thimerosal, which is an ethyl mercury-based preservative in vaccines. That was used in the entire childhood vaccine schedule throughout the 80s and 90s. Now it's only used in flu vaccines. But to get to the point, heavy metal toxin exposures like mercury or aluminum can increase the viral-related disease process. It disrupts innate and adaptive immunity. So if a person, let's say, is healthy, functional, healthy, strong immune response, but they're harboring viruses, maybe passed on from their mother, they receive a vaccine and now they disrupt that immunity. And now that viral infection that was laying dormant inside their cells reactivates. And when this happens, it can trigger many different disease processes and inflammatory conditions, be it in the liver, the gallbladder, or the brain. And that's where viral encephalitis and autism spectrum disorder come into play.
So what is the the big thing that we're always trying to do on the Maha with Mike podcast is we're looking for solutions, right? Because there's parents out there that did not make an informed consent decision. They just blindly listen to their doctor. And I think one of the biggest issues that we have in this country, Matt, is people are put way below profits. And when you start giving people compensations, and you've got Blue Cross and Blue Shield giving commission schedules to doctors saying, hey, if a certain percentage of all of your patients receive this, you will get this. We already knew this happened with the COVID-19 vaccine because there's leaked paperwork out there that shows the structures. Here's the commission structure that you're going to get. They weren't asking what's the long-term safety data on this because there was none, right? It was a warp speed vaccine, which we now know that the mRNA technology had been around for 2 decades. This isn't something new. It was rolled out, it was planned, but where can we start to see hope with these parents that have these children that now have this? Because there's more people out there that we're getting involved with, like, Tracy Slepcevic, the warrior mom who did everything that she could to reverse her child's autism diagnosis, who unfortunately was vaccinated. So in your Substack, are you coming across anything that is like, I hate to use the term silver bullet, but are you seeing anything that can help these parents to reverse the conditions?
When you look into the pathology of autism spectrum disorder and the etiology, a recurring theme is immunosuppression and immune system dysfunction. So there's chronic neurological inflammation, that's well established. Chronic inflammation in the brain, low-grade inflammation. There's also a lot of research on the immunological response, say, to viral infections is primarily driven by natural killer cells. And repeatedly, those with autism spectrum disorder are shown to have natural killer cell dysfunction. Based on what I'm seeing on my research, there's chronic infection, and then there's toxicity, which is suppressing the immune response. There were multiple meta-analyses released from around the world in the United States, Iran, Japan, showing that those with an ASD diagnosis are heavy metal toxic. Heavy metal toxins like mercury, lead, cadmium, they're hormone disruptors and they're nervous system disruptors. They suppress overall immune function. So let's say you're harboring a viral infection. If you're heavy metal toxic, the immune system will not go after it for clearance. If you reach basically a stalemate between the toxicity, your immune response, and the infection becomes chronic. With ASD specifically, children are stuck in a state of fight or flight. And that's where we talk about the issues with visual and auditory stimuli. Their nervous systems are always overdriven. In my opinion, and based on my research, for a child with autism to heal, they have to detoxify, and then the underlying latent infections that they're harboring will become acute. Their immune system will strengthen, the immunological response will strengthen, and then they'll mount a proper response to any infections. At that point, there's something known as a healing crisis in holistic health circles. Basically, symptoms will get worse before they get better.
That's kind of like the Herxheimer, right? You got the Herxheimer detox when people are going through, cancer detox or mold or parasite cleanses. Sometimes people stop doing the detox because of the symptoms and they feel like they're dying. Well, sometimes you have to die a little to get better, because when, we didn't get sick, we didn't get sick overnight. But, one of the things I wanted to ask you, have you come across any research with nicotine? because nicotine acts on a nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, which are the NACHRS receptor, particularly the A7 subtype. And we've seen in not only animal studies, but even in some clinics that I'm working with, incredible improvements in social behavior and repetitive actions, specifically children who inflict harm on themselves that are nonverbal. They start hitting themselves. And I know it's like one of the worst things, if you're not inside of the circle, Matt, that you and I are in, to say, hey, slap a 6 milligram nicotine patch on your kid's spine. And you're like, I'm not giving my kids cigarettes, but it's kind of like, gosh, man, I know that you and I were not meant to go here today. But, when you read the story about Joe Tippins, who was sent home with small lung cell cancer that spread through his body, and they told him he was going to die, and he started eating fenbendazole, Pancor, a dog dewormer, and the dude went into remission. Sometimes you'll do drastic things to help your children. So have you come across any research showing autism being improved with nicotine?
Simply put, I think nicotine is a stimulant and overdrives the nervous system a little bit. Anytime there's a chronic inflammatory condition, you'll see symptom improvement. Nicotine also raises cortisol levels. So with autism, which really is a chronic inflammatory condition, a mild stimulant like nicotine can definitely be beneficial. There's research showing how children with autism have very poor detoxification. They also have metabolic dysfunction. They're in a hypometabolic state, and they can't detoxify well. My opinion, based on my research and my hypothesis, is that when there's a chronic infection, say a chronic systemic viral infection, testosterone will increase the immune response, the inflammatory response to the infection. And the problem with that is that when a viral infection has become systemic and chronic, testosterone will shut down detoxification pathways in the liver, the gallbladder, and the kidneys. So that's why boys tend to have a higher diagnosis rate than girls. I believe it's hormonal in nature. Hormones play a major part in this, in the endocrine system as a whole. But back to the question, yeah, I think nicotine can be beneficial. My concern is that when it comes to chronic illness, it has to become acute before there's healing and before there's remission. Whatever's driving that inflammation has to be resolved, primarily, generally speaking, with a cellular mediated response. And that can be very, very dangerous. So there's a lot to this. It's a complex situation.
It's funny. It's funny that we live in a world now where all of the information that we have, and I go to, and again, I'm not blasting any names, okay? I have done some of the biggest health conferences in the world, and I will say that the only person that really does it right is Dr. Edward Group with Global Healing. They do the Healing for the Ages conference, and it is the most well-attended, the most well-informed, the best speakers, and they don't hold back. They don't water anything down, okay? I don't hold anything back. I'm a God-fearing man, and I'm a Christian, and I grew up in a Baptist church. I don't go to watered-down churches. Right. So if I go into a church and if I can beat the preacher that's there in a Bible trivia, then I'm at the wrong church, because I want somebody that's living by the word of God. Everything was written for a reason. Don't have to turn this into a Christian theology session. But one of the things that I find the most moronic is when I attend some of these autism conferences and you go out there and they've got food laid out like Doritos and Dasani water bottles. I'm like, you're getting heavy fluoridated water and putting more toxins and glyphosate into an already overstressed. And Matt, I don't want to, tell people how spot on you are, because, it kind of gives people like a little bit of an ego boost. And I know that, ego is definitely edging God out. But when you start talking about them having this suppressed immune system, it is 100%. You're spot on. Like, we've got to figure out how to get these autistic children how to get them to start boosting their glutathione levels, how to get their liver to start detoxing, how to get them some, N-acetylcysteine, which are the NAC, however you say that fancy word, protein isolates, get them methylated vitamins, especially B12, methylcobalamin and the B6 and folates, even magnesium and zinc are so important for these children with autism or that are on the spectrum to start detoxing their body. But not only that, how important is it, Matt, for these parents to limit the toxins in the first place? Like, give them healthier food. I understand it's very hard when you have an autistic nonverbal kid and all they want is a Hershey's chocolate bar, but I promise you they're not going to starve. If you remove the stuff from the house, they will do what they see mom and dad do. So from a very young age, if you made a decision to vaccinate or not vaccinate, and again, I want to be very clear here. There are countless cases out there of unvaccinated children that still get autism. But you also have to understand that if there's poison in the water, Matt, if there's poison in the air, if there's poison in the food, the same things that are in the vaccine that could lead to autism can lead to autism even if you don't have an injection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You made a great point. When we start talking about immune system suppression and chronic illness, a lot of the times what you see is an overreaction to foods and things in their environment. The allergic side of the immune system is hyperactivated, and the cell-mediated side of the immune system is underactive. So a person's constantly overreacting to things that they're eating, things in their environment, and underreacting to infections. This leads into something I've been working on that I think is really, really important, and plays into autism as well and the entire chronic illness epidemic. But I put together a video documentary series on the decline of our body temperatures around the world. Healthy resting body temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the global average for over a century, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. In the last 25 years, our body temperatures have collectively declined, and 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit is no longer the average. A person's body temperature is one of the most accurate markers of overall immune function and basal metabolic rate. That's why it's known as a vital sign. One of the first things they check when you go into a doctor's office is your body temperature. The fact that our body temperatures are all declining has very, very serious implications. We start talking about immunosuppression, chronic illness, toxicity, chronic infections, hormonal imbalances. That all kind of goes hand in hand with low body temperature. My video series, episode 1 and 2 are already out. You can find that on my Substack, healthuncensored.substack.com. And episode 3 is where I talk about how to restore metabolic rate, how to raise body temperature, how to improve immune function. But this is something, the decline in our body temperatures is something that no one's talking about, really. It's not being addressed. And in my opinion, it's one of the most significant events in the history of mankind. Really, really big.
And we've only got about 7 minutes left, but I would love to dive into that because I don't like doing cliffhangers. Give us a little bit about what you're researching and what you think we can do to correct that, to increase it. I mean, I already know, but I want my listeners to know.
Sure. Okay, so a bit of a background. The 98.6 degree average was established in the mid 1800s, and that carried through until sometime after 1975. Shortly into the 2000s, our body temperature started declining around the world. As I mentioned, the implications on that basically directly is overall immune function and metabolic rate. For anyone listening, immune function is your body's response to pathogens and foreign substances. That's what your immune system does. It responds to pathogens and foreign substances. And your basal metabolic rate really is your ability to generate heat and energy from food you eat, from calories. So these are major problems. As far as bringing core body temperature up and improving metabolic rate, I talked a little bit about the immune system getting stuck into a hyperallergen state and chronic low-grade inflammation. Limiting that is a major step towards improving metabolic disease, bringing down that chronic low-grade inflammation. This is going to, when you go from a hypometabolic state, well, let me back up a little bit. When a person is stuck in a state of hypometabolism, slow metabolism, they're also going to have slow detoxification, poor detoxification. When you start to shift back and you reduce chronic inflammation, things start to normalize. Detoxification starts to pick up, methylation picks up, metabolism returns. At some point, a person detoxifies, the hormones balance, the nervous system calms down, and then, as I was mentioning with ASD, there's a period of acute illness, which now the body goes from an allergen-driven response to a cell-mediated driven response, and it'll address any chronic infections. In the last 10 or 20 years, there's been a lot of talk, and a lot of people are suffering from chronic pathogens, whether it's chronic Lyme disease, chronic Epstein-Barr, HIV and AIDS, long COVID. It's not necessarily the pathogen that you need to focus on, it's immune system modulation. You have to restore immune function, and then your immune system will do its job.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question just based off of general hypothesis, and I'm not trying to discredit anything that you just said, but I want to offer a possibility and see if this could possibly play to it. I know that when humans change, when we adapt, right, God gave us the ability to be able to change and for us to be able to adapt to some very crazy situations. I'm only thinking that in the last 25 to 30 years, because where I'm at, I understand that, and I'm going to ask you a direct correlation. I've noticed in my study, airwaterhealing.com has done a lot of research on indoor air pollution, and since the inception of energy efficient windows and putting in air conditioners, we have seen a drastic increase in illnesses worldwide because we're trapping toxins. We're no longer letting fresh air come inside. But the question that I have to you is, now that we kind of live in a thermally regulated environment, could that be why you're seeing a possible added decrease to the worldwide decreased temperature, because our bodies are no longer having to have that 98.6 because we've put in heaters in every occupied space in North America, like, outside, like maybe you and I need to do a baseline study. I wonder if people that are homeless, that live outside, that don't have access to cold or heat, I wonder if we did a baseline study of people who live indoors versus people who live outdoors, if that body temperature has regulated them as well. Am I crazy for thinking that?
That's a great question. And it would be interesting to see. One of the most noteworthy studies when I started researching this was there's a tribe in the Bolivian Amazon known as the Chamani tribe. While body temperatures were dropping all around the world, they still held a 98.6 degree Fahrenheit average, their entire community.
Boom.
There was a team sent by the National Institute of Health in the early 2000s to improve their access to healthcare. And they found that this tribe that still held healthy resting body temperature in 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, they had some of the lowest rates of diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, and heart disease in the world, conditions that have become widespread and prevalent in the United States. Their access to healthcare was improved, prescription medications, vaccines, etc., and their body temperature started rapidly declining. Nothing else changed in their environment. Their diets didn't change. Their access to air conditioning didn't change. Their lifestyles were relatively the same, but they were introduced into conventional Western medicine. In episode 2 of my series, I talk about some of the environmental factors that'll lower body temperature in animal models and in humans. And generally speaking, we're talking about toxin exposures, heavy metals, microplastics, antibiotics as well. These are all factors in this.
Well, listen, in the closing 30 seconds, give everybody your Substack. Let them know how they can follow you. If you want to share any of your socials, be my guest. We want to help support you and get your research out there. Go ahead.
My Substack, you could find directly healthuncensored.com, or the actual Substack link is healthuncensored.substack.com. that's the best place to find me. It's free to sign up. It's free to subscribe. You know, I'm working on a lot of different video series I'm going to be putting out on there, covering a wide range of topics. That's pretty much it. That's the best place to find me is Substack. I really appreciate you having me on today, Mike. I'm going to be sending this out to my subscribers.
Yeah, not a problem. And listen, I don't know if you have my producer's number, but if we can support you financially at all, you're more than welcome to. If you want, I can talk to you after the show, or you can ask my producer, connect you and I together. I'd love to have you as an affiliate. And if you want, I can refer you a couple really good glutathione products that are here in the United States, microsomal, all in glass jars. I've been out to the facility, but I'd love to have you as an affiliate if you want to make a little bit of money for your Substack, and we can even dive deeper into products that can help children with autism. I've got a bunch of them on my website, and you and I can dive deeper later.
Sure. I'm always looking, you know, for support and help. And that sounds great. I like to support righteous causes as well. So
absolutely. Well, God bless you, and thank you for sharing your information. And we'll have you on the show again.
Mike, thank you.
No problem. God bless. Guys, thank you so much for being the best part of Maha with Mike, which is my audience. Let's make ourselves healthy again. Let's make the world healthy again. God bless, and see you next week.